Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Black Techies podcast. I am your host, Herbert Seward, and I am joined by my co pilot, partner in crime, tech ops out in the streets, Leslie Moore, Southern University grad, coder extraordinaire. Um, Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to our host emeritus, our founder, Dave Matthews, aka Packet Stealer. He's been kind of holding it down um, while the show was kind of going through some format transitions and was on a little bit of a hiatus. Uh, but I want to give our audience a heads up that we're back. We're back in the saddle. So we're going to be doing the best we can to bring you guys the best content that we can as it relates to Black techies, HBCUs, and technology, and the intersection of everything else there. Um, we will also be back on the HBCU digital network platform starting our next episode. So, with that being said, welcome, Leslie. Thank you for coming back.
Glad to be
this
back.
has been, yeah, this has been really an interesting transition for us. All of us have been part of the Black Techies have been going through some sort of professional transition, all of it good, um, in some form or fashion. Uh, for those of you that don't know, Leslie's prodigious coding talents have landed her in the state of Texas. I'll let her tell you guys about that. Um, but yeah, I think we had we are going to do a smorgasbord today, but in light of recent um, events dealing with the Supreme Court and everything else, I feel the need that the majority of our show that is going to be dedicated to that today.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so before I get my banners and disclaimers and stuff ready, I want to get that out first because I think I'm going to be using them a lot this episode. So Leslie, what do you think, man? What do you think about this whole thing with affirmative action and the Supreme Court? I got a lot of thoughts, but I want to kind of work up to this a little bit before we do anything else.
Uh, I sat through. I read the dissension. I read both viewpoints. I read what's being taken away, and I think we're just. If anyone hasn't noticed, we're slowly reverting back to the 50s, and everybody just wants to let it happen. But neither here nor there. That's a whole nother podcast. Uh, HBCUs need to step up. Point blank. Period. There's no longer the choice of going to an HBCU might have came down to family, friends, other people going there. You like the school, cost of going, the credentials or everything with it. HBCUs need to take this as a take notice that we need to step up. All HBCUs should see a swell in enrollment. They need to start seeing even if they don't get in a swell in applications because now the PWIs are going back to we really don't even have to accept you if we really don't want to off the strength of you being black. Yes, we have our own you can't tell me no school doesn't have a diversity quota. You know they're there, but they're only going to at this point they're literally only going to take the best of the best of the best. They don't have to say we can just take you because you want to be here. They're going to cherry pick a whole lot more. And that's not fair to those who may not do standardized testing well or those from a low income who finally got a way out and found a way to go to that school that they chose to go to and can't go because they're like, well, I'm not saying we want you to go. I'm not saying we don't want you. We're just saying no. And they don't have to be like, it's not because of your race. They could just be like, well, you're just not good enough. And you're going to see a lot of this is going to hurt. Like my son's in high school. I'm not saying he was going to need affirmative action to get him nowhere because he's doing high school and college courses. So him getting into a good school, I have no qualms about his grades getting him into a school. But now this kind of screws him over for his schools of choice. They can literally just look at him and be like, no. And that's not fair to the kids. That's not fair to the ones who really want to go somewhere and do something. Now they have to fight even harder. And HBCU should be looking at those kids and being like, well, come on home. That's
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, man. I mean, we've already, and as somebody that's followed, that's been in the space, um, in a media capacity for the last 2 or 3 years, covering HBCU athletics. That's my digital media, moonlighting, nighttime gig, so to speak.
right.
That's one of the things. By the way, shout out to HBCU Digital for and busting brackets and fan sided and a number of platforms that have given me the opportunity, and voice to cover HBCU athletics and esports and kind of jump mix them all up in a good gumbo. Um, there was already a really good, um, uh, I would like to call it a renaissance of kids rediscovering HBCUs in the wake of George Floyd. Um, and now I think the decision that happened this week, um, it speaks to there are a lot of layers to it, and it's not necessarily just the fact that again, black folk are on the short end of the stick comes to a decision that essentially was a failsafe against the mentalities that you know forced the federal government to put affirmative action in place in the first place. And I think that's the thing that really bothers me about some of the reactions and some of the feedback that I've seen since the decision went down. Um, it works off of the assumption that these mentalities and biases have gone anywhere, and they haven't. If you've been in this country for the last 4, 5, or 6 years, you know firsthand that the mentalities we're talking about, the biases and prejudices that we're talking about, are front and center. They're front and center with, in our political system, the front and center all the way down to the very granular level of our personal interactions rather.
Mm.
Um, how people perceive, you know, everything from going in the grocery store to interactions with police. So, I it, one of the things that kind of struck me when the news broke, and I was like, wow, they really did it, was the fact that the guy that brought the case, I forgot the guy's full name, but his last name is Bloom. He was a lawyer for an organization that had brought the case, brought an identical case with a white, essentially a white student. I believe this is and this is the University of Texas. Um, Pretty much, saying that the student was discriminated against because a black student with a comparable GPA got in over that student. Um, they changed tactics and um, they went to an Asian student. The Asian student and the organization that this student represented. Well, I mean, first the guy was Canadian, he wasn't even American. And not that there's anything bad with Canadians. I love Canadians. Canadians are cool people. Um, but the the organization was essentially parroting a lot of the tropes and a lot of the doublespeak that the guy that really was trying to get this case in front of the Supreme Court to win in the first place got laughed out of court with before. And the fact that this was an Asian American that was complaining that they were being discriminated against because their test scores were high and they didn't get into Harvard or UNC, as opposed to that black student that had some slightly lower grades, but were, qualifying grades all nonetheless. Um, there are a lot of layers to that, and I'm not sure if we have enough show to go into it. Um,
We don't.
and and that, if I were to go into it, I would definitely have to have my banner ready, my disclaimer banner, because uh, that's a real demonetization conversation right there. But um, at the end of the day, I want particularly kids that watch our podcast to really think about um, why affirmative action had to be instituted in the first place. And it wasn't because, black students couldn't excel or couldn't um, meet the merit standards that those universities had. It was because they were not allowed to. They were not allowed to be even included in the spaces to achieve those things. And I think one of the things that we really need to understand about what we've seen in terms of rolling back of these advancements is that there's a very sizable chunk of population out there that reflects that mentality that I was just referring to. It may not be as overt as it was back in the 1950s and 60s, but it is very palpable and it is still there. And it's there in force. It's just coded. It's just dressed up. It's wearing a suit. It's that Karen at the grocery store that thinks you're not supposed to be buying that steak or lobster. And I think the fact that there are so many other overtones that have kind of come to the forefront in regards to this. It speaks a lot, and from a technology standpoint, it. I mean, and we're going to get into that in the next segment. From a technology standpoint, HBCUs in general, HBCUs and to a lesser extent, uh, PBIs, or predominantly black institutions. Um, it's a double-edged sword, particularly for HBCUs. Um, there are going to be technological things or tech things that will have to happen in mass for all of our schools in order to really take advantage of the fact that there's a new landscape out there because of this court decision. You know, um, and we'll get into that with the next segment. But I want to go ahead and take a real quick break to shout out our evil HBCU overlords at HBCU Digital Network. Shout out Mr. Powell. I'll be in contact with you shortly, soon. But in the meantime, catch this and we'll be right back.
Yeah, baby, you know what time it is. Now let's get it started.
Are you kidding me? Unreal!
While our HBCUs are mostly known for academic rigor, community, they also know how to turn up.
Does he have it? Yes, he does!
And that might be the knockout punch.
All right, and we are back now. Um, in our discussion in regards to this case, um, I think Leslie is absolutely right. I think HBCUs have a lot of stepping up to do. But I also think there's a very unique opportunity out there for HBCUs, particularly for public land grants, HBCUs that that are really, really forward facing and community serving. Um, I mean, to be quite honest with you, it's an opportunity to really put our best foot forward and say, hey, look, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff here. Hold on for just a second. Our Leslie's having a little bit of problem with her mic. Um, Leslie, try that again. I'm gonna remove you from the stream, and then we're gonna do it again. All right, there
How
you
about
go.
now?
Yep, there you go. She
All
back.
right. I think the biggest thing that we're really gonna have to work on is I can see the appeal of going to a PWI, but we got to start advertising our outside curriculum outside of sports, keeping it a book. Right now, the biggest thing people look for HBCUs, we're about to hit bowl season. Everybody's excited about football, basketball, baseball. There's a school now that has a hockey team, so we getting into that now. We need to start looking at these schools as more than just athletic farms. Like we have HBCUs that have some of the best programs in the nation and don't get recognition for it. And on the tech standpoint, we got to start looking towards making sure that our students can perform on this. If I go to a PWI and I see a computer lab that's open 24 hours a day with security and everybody's on MacBooks, it's all nice, white, shiny, beautiful, and you go to the HBCU and you're like, you're in the basement, nobody's going to want to go there. We have to start making ourselves look a little better since we look like we're about to get an influx. And a lot of parents are going to have to start doing a lot more research for the majors that our kids are going into. Just being 100, we just got to step up all the way around.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But in saying that, um I think there are schools that are ahead of the curve, and I think when we talk about this, we have to be very careful about um doing it in a very collective, broad sweeping fashion. Because
Right.
I mean, I could look at some place like North Carolina A&T, for example. Um, the I mean, I was just on campus not that long ago, maybe a month and a half ago, and A&T is legit one of the better um, you know technological schools in the state. For their student and for their student body, even with the questions about funding and how the state and federal government handles that stuff. A&T is great. The same thing can be said for Prairie View, for example. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really depends on um, what leadership at these schools, uh, the connections that they make, one with private industry, particularly private tech industry. I think um, that's a really big frontier for HBCUs for attracting the student influx that's going to come. For the the job markets of the next century, of the 21st and 22nd century,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in emerging job fields where it pertains to, for example, the electrical grid, or where it pertains to transitioning, um, from to newer sources of energy, to quantum computing. A lot of those things are, we have some pretty cutting edge things happening at HBCUs. Um, and I think also the focus has to really um, be just from a very practical standpoint, not necessarily just toward the high school student. And what I mean by that is that even though the high school student is the bread and butter of HBCUs and will always be. We have to really diversify how we look at spreading our brand,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that has a lot to do with who has access to college, who has access to courses, how you have access to courses, particularly when you can't go out of state or when you can't travel to be physically on campus. We hear a lot about housing and the issues behind that for certain schools. One way to really mitigate a lot of that is to really expand distance education and really expand online education in terms of degree programs and diversity for HBCUs. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always talked about that in my own circles about that because as somebody that is, always on the lookout for online degree programs to go back because I would rather, you know, get back in the swing of things at a HBCU. It's always been a challenge. You know, there's been, now these days it's a little bit better in terms of um, how we go about doing it. Um, but I think there are certain schools that are ahead of the curve. A&T comes to mind immediately. Norfolk State has a really robust degree program. Um, and if anybody's been to the site NSU Online, those guys are ridiculously effective in terms of not just offering those offerings to traditional students, but offering those offerings to the non-traditional students. Everything from African American studies to cybersecurity. Now, mind you, of course, Norfolk, Hampton, in that area, they have the military. They have a military population to serve as well because uh, the seat of the U.S. Navy and U.S. Armed Forces is there in that region. But
Mm-hmm.
that should give you a really good idea of how we can kind of, get ahead of the curve, so to speak. You know, not just developing those distance education programs, but really integrating the technology that we see today into those programs. Like, for example, I'm in Northern Virginia in the DC metro area. Northern Virginia Community College is probably one of the most tech advanced community college systems I've ever seen. And those guys are always looking for relationships with schools,
Mm-hmm.
partnerships, relationships. Um, as of right now, I think Norfolk State, Virginia State, and Hampton and Howard University have are the HBCUs that have partnerships with Northern Virginia Community College, if I'm not mistaken. I think Morgan State is in there, but don't quote me on that. The thing about it is that we should see that across the board in every state, and I mean,
Mm-hmm. Well,
particularly in particularly in the
especially in the
South,
South.
because yeah, particularly in the South, because you have a number of HBCUs that are at the community college or junior college level. You know, where in Mississippi is a good example. You got Hines Junior College and a couple others, Bishop Junior College. That I mean, I'm not sure, and I'm pretty sure somebody that's watching, that's a JSU alum or Mississippi Valley State alum could probably chime on this a little bit more than I could. But that relationship with those junior colleges that are particularly ones that are, historically black, um, could really mean the difference in terms of really expanding that footprint for other, private entities in terms of technology to come into that area. The same could be said for Louisiana. Um, Same could be said for Texas. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
look at Texas Southern and Prairie View as part of the Texas A&M system, and it's like, okay, there's absolutely no reason for any sort of discrepancy in terms of funding and in terms of being able to get the resources necessary, because that university system is chock full of cash.
Oh, funny story. Let's keep it on the systems because everyone had a pleasant surprise or really unpleasant surprise. I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago when they found out Grambling State University is part of the University of Louisiana system, which has
Mhm.
ULM and ULL, and we both know they got money. Now, when the word they bought the Grambling system early 2010s, no one knew until
Mm.
Grambling Jackson State debacle. That game when they couldn't have the game because the gym was full of mold, and everybody's like, "Well, Grambling's supposed to have all this money. They're part of the University of Louisiana system." Lo and behold, the University of Louisiana system was like, "Wow, that's true."
Yeah, where's the money at? And
Oh.
that's going to bring me to the next topic, and I'm going to put the banner up, the disclaimer for that before I get started. The views of Herbert Seward are not necessarily views of the Black Techies podcast or the HBCU Digital Network. They're in. So yeah, now that that's out of the way, we're going to talk about why the point you just made is very important. And not only is it important for the state of Louisiana and Grambling, but why this is the case for pretty much everywhere there's an HBCU, a public land grant HBCU.
Mm-hmm.
For lack of a better word, we've been getting screwed out of money for decades. Now, in my home area, the state of Maryland um, recently lost a suit to Bowie State, Morgan State, UMES, to the tune of $300 million in back pay and underfunding. Tennessee State is fighting a battle now to get $500 million of money that's owed to them from their state government. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I want people to really think about that for a minute. These aren't just isolated cases. If you look at where HBCUs are, and I think my boy, um, I think a buddy of mine on Twitter posted a graphic, and I haven't had a chance to find it. Next time I find it and put it on the show, I will. There's a list of HBCUs that have state public HBCUs that have the same issue, where states have grossly underfunded them by millions of dollars year in and year out. This school right here, Alabama State University and Alabama A&M, they they were being underfunded since their inception. Back before Brown versus Board of Education came about, and all through Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I think that's the case is true for just about every public HBCU, whether it's land grant or liberal arts HBCU in the South. And that brings me to this, why this decision is so important and the links that we're going to have to go to really make sure that HBCUs cash in and get that check. In the words of Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
when we come into DC, we're coming for our check. That's a quote that most of the folks that are cheering this affirmative action decision probably don't know from Martin Luther King outside of the generic stuff. That guy was a reparations advocate, but we're not going to get into that conversation. What we are going to get into is restorative funding. And that's exactly what has to happen with HBCUs. And the way
It
that's
does.
going to happen is exactly the way the folks that were pushing for the removal of affirmative action got their success, and that's legislatively through the courts. In some cases, it's going to have to be punitive via lawsuit. That's what the HBCUs of the state of Maryland did in suing the Maryland University system. And that's how they started getting their check. They essentially took the state of Maryland to court and won. And the crazy thing is that just about every HBCU that's a state or a state land grant institution has this case.
But they'd have to actually fight for it, though.
If Tennessee State is any indication, those guys ain't playing around. Those guys are they're really about fighting for that. And I think the biggest thing that I've gotten from some of the interactions that I've had this year, or rather this particular week, after the decision, was that these actions are already underway, in a lot of places. I'm not sure how fruitful that stuff is going to be in Florida, folks there, but I know in places like Mississippi, Tate Reeves is about to see a lot of that stuff. Tennessee State is already fighting that battle with the State House in Tennessee. Virginia's doing it. I wouldn't be surprised to see. I wouldn't be surprised to see Central State or Kentucky State doing it, because in the case of Kentucky State, those guys have been grossly underfunded. The North Carolina system is evaluating that now. Same thing with South Carolina. I can see South Carolina State and the public institutions in South Carolina going after the state. So, I mean, that's a very important dynamic in terms of how this decision is going to have ripple effects for not just students that want to attend PWIs, but students that want to attend HBCUs. And I think, at the end of the day, it's going to be really up, really on our leadership to not just, use this moment to say, hey, you don't have to worry about that here. Come home. But this is what you'll be able to get when you get here. And I think your point to that earlier was 100% on point. And I think this podcast is we normally talk about stuff through the lens of technology. This has a direct impact on that, even though there's nothing being talked about in terms of code or whether Google's going to be on this campus or not.
Yeah,
the ability
that's another thing. A lot of these bigger corporations, they need to see what's about to happen and be like, what we need to do for these tax cuts? What local HBCUs in my state? Where can I funnel some of this money around?
Exactly. And I think again, it's one of the things that our leadership at some of these, particularly our public HBCUs. I think private HBCUs have a little bit more leeway in terms of the partnerships that they can go after, and in terms of how affirmative action affects them. I don't, for lack of a better term, I see those kids that may get turned off by this decision from going to a Harvard or Yale, going to a Howard, or going to a Morehouse, or going to a Spelman, or going to a Tuskegee. or going to a Dillard, or Xavier. I mean, there are a lot of things that come along with that, but I think the biggest thing is that we have to be in a position to, to receive the influx that could be coming. And it has to go beyond, okay, how many houses do I have on campus? How many rooms do I have on campus? Because I think infrastructure is something that, comes hand in hand with funding. It goes hand in hand with having the money to build those things, having the money to put that infrastructure in place to handle that load. And for the longest time, PWIs never really had to worry about that. But there were some other things that came out of the Supreme Court. Would you like to address those, Leslie?
No. After you. I'm gonna need the banner.
Nah.
I don't ask for the banner very often, but I want the banner, and you go first.
Well,
I gotta.
Well, that's why I'm about to take my banner down.
No.
And put your banner up. Okay.
Oh,
So, all right. So there are two other things that came out of our friends at the Supreme Court this week, outside of what we just talked about in terms of affirmative action. One was the result of a concocted case, a case that really didn't exist, that ultimately ended in the rollback of rights for a protected class of people. The second thing that came about pretty much affected 40 million people. And if you went to school at a PWI or HBCU and you signed that nice little piece of paper that got you the loan check at the end of every semester, yeah,
that refund check money. You about to be back on the hook for that.
Yes, and not only are you going to be on the hook, it's going to be rough. Now, President Biden, went over some things in terms of a plan B, but let us tell you what happened to plan A. Plan A went the way of the dodo. In a 6-3 descent, the student loan forgiveness program that the President of the United States was pushing and really ran on got snuffed out.
And I was one of the people that was forgiven. I'm ready to square up.
Yeah. And
I'm ready to
before I let Leslie put her banner up and let her go to town, I am going to take another little ad break, and I'm going to let her go once we get back. Stay tuned.
Yeah, baby, you know what time it is. Now let's get it started.
Are you kidding me? Unreal!
While our HBCUs are mostly known for academic rigor, community, they also know how to turn up.
Does he have it? Yes, he does! And that might be the knockout punch.
All right, we're back. Go ahead, put your banner up, I'm gonna put your banner up because I can see you bubbling. So let me go ahead and find your banner because
usually I never have a banner. I'm usually very calm, cool, collected. I stay on the up and up. I'm good and I'm ready, and I'm
let's see it.
always
Let's see
calm about it.
Let's see, Roberto. Dominic. There we go, Leslie, the banner. Okay. The views of Leslie Moore are not necessarily views of the Black Techies podcast or the HBCU Digital Network. Now that that's out of the way, Leslie, take it away.
In terms of student loan forgiveness, I was one of the people that was forgiven. I've been fighting that battle. I've been out of school for almost 20 years and I've been fighting that battle. I may not have as much left over, but boy, having that little bit off my plate made my life a little easier. I have moving expenses. I have a son that's about to be of college age. I'm trying to put money off to the side to get him set up where he won't have to follow in his mother's footsteps. I only took those loans for 4 semesters. I didn't need to take it for all 4 years. I just needed to supplement my scholarship after the first two. Now, they got me all the way screwed up. And this is how. You're dealing with inflation. You're dealing with the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of everything since the pandemic has skyrocketed. It has no way to go back down. Now, pre-pandemic, we had a way of dealing with things because everything was cost effective and we can make it. The payments hurt, but they didn't hurt nowhere near as bad. Now we had a couple months ago, people talk about paying $8 for eggs. And y'all here talking about we need you to pick up on these same amount of payments that you had prior to these skyrocketing food costs, to these skyrocketing gas costs, to these skyrocketing utility costs without my pay rate skyrocketing. And you expect me to really just be like, I can incur this extra $150, $200 a check or 400, 300, 400 a month and think I'm going to take it on the chin like it's fine. It's great. So what y'all really trying to say is you don't want people to go to school anymore. You don't want people to run the risk of ruining their credit or trying to get into these high profile jobs because you won't, even the ones of us who have fought to get what we got and have to pay it back. There was a time where we made it work. You gave us a reprieve. You came through on your campaign promise and gave us a student loan program, forgiveness program. People signed up for it. They were approved for it. We started to make concessions around not having to deal with that on our day-to-day struggle. And now the Supreme Court is like, nah, we need that money. So basically what you're saying is you don't want Americans to make it. We are the most first world, third world country I've ever seen in my goddamn life. Like we want to be on top so bad. We want to say we are doing the best so bad, but you are so ready to take your learned, the people who are supposed to make this country run, because we went through the struggles, we went through the hassle, we went through the hell to get this education, and now you're going to give us triple the hell just to try to pay it back. All because of politics. All because of you out here making promises to other countries around the world like, yeah, we got it, we got you, we got you, we got you. Who got us? Who got your citizens? Who got us? Like real facts. Who got us? We ain't got us. Y'all got us messed up, but you ain't got us. I'm going to have to literally sit here and figure out within the next 4 years, not even 4 years. I got 3.5 years to figure out how I'm going to make sure my son's education is taken care of, to make sure that he don't put himself in the same hell I put myself in because he wants a higher education. And then he's going to have to fight to get into a higher education, then have to fight to pay for it. I need this damn country to pick a struggle. Pick a struggle. You don't want us in your school, and then you want to make it so we can't afford to go to your schools. And pick a goddamn struggle. I'm struggling right now. I'm hurt. My buttons are pushed.
I don't blame you.
I just can't.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I'm a little bit more fortunate than most. I had student loans like everybody else, but I had the benefit of, or let me rephrase that, I had the luck of going into the United States military at a time where, there wasn't the BS that was going on prior to 9/11, um, where you could go in, get the GI Bill, and essentially that's what you were in there for. You went in, did your 4 years, 4 years reserve, and came out. Now, I say I'm blessed because the day I separated from the United States Navy was the day the planes hit. I remember going through my exit, my final exit interview, and walking across base at Naval Base Norfolk. Um, when I had another petty officer come up to me and say, "Yo, you need to get to a television." And by the time I got to the food court where the television was at, there's two towers smoking. And I think that brings up a bigger discussion as it relates to why this is a tragedy. Okay, it's a tragedy because one, the cost of higher education is not going down anytime soon.
It's so bad. When I went to Southern, 3,527 $3,527 a semester gave me my tuition and my room and board. Now that 3,500 won't even give you tuition. That's not room and board or anything else. That's barely tuition. Now that's on the lower end of the spectrum, but still at the same time, it's a struggle. It's
Yeah,
hard. And the thing is, the way this country is set up, a high school diploma won't get you entry level no more. It'll get you entry level, but what is it really worth?
yeah,
You even
and I
with
mean,
a degree, you put yourself in debt, you're still not getting your worth.
yeah, and I think for me, it's very fortunate, in the sense that uh, technology, information technology in particular, is one of those fields that's broad enough to absorb the degreed and the non-degreed. And I say that by saying, depending on where you live at, where you are in the country, or where you find yourself finding employment, um, you know, eh, you can get away with not having a degree at least for a while, depending on how far you plan on going, what specialties you're planning on getting into. For other degree fields, for other jobs, that's not a reality. And I think um, that's a big problem. Not only is it a problem, it's a reckoning that America's going to have to deal with in the long run, because as long as you got stuff like this going on, kids ain't going to want to go to school. Kids are going to be like, okay, I'd rather be an entrepreneur. I'd rather do this. I'd rather do that.
You're
You
gonna
know,
you're gonna see a lot. You're gonna see a lot of kids coming out of high school. As much as they love, you're gonna see a lot more content creators and influencers
yeah,
as opposed to. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a content creator. I'm on hiatus until I get a bunch of other stuff straight. But at the same
content creator
time,
here.
you're a content creator as well, and
Yeah,
you can
I
make
got a
extra
day
money
job.
off the side. But right, I also have a day job, which I'm working overtime in my day job. This is the first Saturday I've been off since May. So, I
Side note:
mean, it
this right here, it's crack. It's
it
crack.
is.
Milo Sweet Tea. This is not an advertisement for Milo Sweet Tea, mind you, but I just needed to interject that there while we're talking about this. Go ahead. You're back.
But at the same time, it's like you're showing these kids we don't want you to, especially in our community, you're showing us that you don't want us to learn because we're gonna make it hard. It's hard to get into the school, hard to pay for it, and hard to deal with. So again, the struggle. We're in the middle. Our culture's in the middle of it, thanks to the Supreme Court. Again, just look at they're not done. They're not done. They've already come. They've come for women's rights. They're coming for minority education. We're not the last protected group that they're coming for the last protected group.
Oh yeah,
They want they're coming. I mean, the signs are on the wall. They are rolling back as much protection for everyone other than heterosexual white people.
Yeah,
They're the only
and I
ones that are
want
suffering right
yeah, and I want folks to that may be checking the podcast out for the first time. Um, this is not uh, this is not one of those podcasts that we're normally focused on this particular topic, but uh, as
now.
Black
It's
people, it needs to be said, and I think a
yeah,
lot of
we're
times, yeah, a lot of times we're a little bit disconnected from that reality, um, and it's a hard thing to talk about sometimes, but it's necessary, and I think it's something that at the end of the day, you're going to have these conversations one way or the other. Um, and personally, I would hate to continue to have these conversations under the premise of seeing the news that we saw this week. You know what I'm saying? So,
it's so bad. The thing is, as much as we see that this country is changing for the best of us, but at the same time, the best thing you can really do, or the best thing you can really say, is as a culture, they're giving us an excuse to actually come together and do better. We see that we got to watch out for ourselves. We've got to,
yeah,
especially in the technology field. We are limited in the technology field. They're trying to limit us at the door. So we
yeah.
need, for those of us in the industry, we need to do our part too.
Well, I think that's another thing that we need to really talk about. You know, for those of you guys out there that aren't familiar with the Black Techies are a group of like-minded IT professionals that happen to have strong HBCU ties. I went to Alabama State.
Southern
Leslie
University
is
A&M, baby.
Leslie is a Jag. She went to Southern University. My boy Dave, who's the founder of the Black Techies, along with myself, he went to North Carolina A&T and Tennessee State, respectively. Uh, my boy Dominic Lee, he's also a Tennessee State product, and our other resident militant, Roberto Joseph, aka Miles Morales, he's a Morehouse guy. And we all decided to, at some point in time, really come together and put our heads together to do this podcast. Just, particularly for moments like this, where we see something seminal happen in the news in this country that affects, us on a very granular level, and we get the chance to talk about it. And I think what needs to really be said is that if you're an HBCU product, if you're an HBCU supporter, if you're in a community where the HBCU is your centerpiece, not only provide support, but make sure that your administrations are held accountable for progress, because it is more important than ever now with the rollbacks we've seen in the Supreme Court, with some of the repudiation of some of the common sense stuff that we've seen in just about every aspect of societal norms that we take for granted. Um, it's important. It's more important than ever. And I think, um, not to get super political, but if there's any example of the mantra that voting matters, this is it.
We've
What
been
you're seeing
saying
now,
that voting matters since 2016. We have been seeing the effects of people saying, I don't need to vote or I don't need to go to the polls because they don't affect me since 2016. And we've been paying for it ever since. My bad. Had to say
yep. Well, I'm going to put your banner back up.
it. I'm sorry. I'm good. I'm good.
Hey, man. But but you're absolutely right, and I think that's something that is ultimately missed. Um, a lot of times when we talk about these things in our circles, and we're not talking about, um, folks outside of the circles we're talking about. We're talking about us. And I think a lot of times, it's one thing to be frustrated, and I get it. When you vote for party A or party B long enough, and you don't see the results that you expect to see, you know, you get to thinking, and you think about frustration. But what I would add to that is participating in the process and being knowledgeable about doing so makes all the difference in the world. It,
Mhm.
that this doesn't mean, okay, I'm snoozing for 4 years, and then on the fourth year, every presidential cycle, I just show up and vote.
And that's
That
the problem.
Yeah,
That is the biggest problem. If you want to make a change, the biggest changes come in your small elections. You don't like things going on in your town or city, check for those election dates. Then work to your state. Then work to then work presidential and congressional. But we have not, everything started with every bit of, literally everything started in 2016, and
yeah,
it's been a trickle down ever since, and we're never going to fully recover from this. We're not. It's not about affirmative action going away or coming back. It's not about student loan forgiveness. It's about the direction of this interesting bird of a country. You could be right wing, you can be left wing, still the same bird. It's still a very jacked up bird, but it's the same thing. You can't base everything off of singular beliefs. You have to sit and actually look at who you're voting for.
bird is mid. The bird is mid at best.
You
Mid,
ain't lying. The bird is extremely
mediocre.
mid. You
Yeah,
you can't
and
get you cannot get mad. It's the
and
bird.
and I said something earlier today. Well, earlier yesterday, rather. On a, I'm gonna see if I can find that tweet and share it. Um, but this is something, and I want people that watch us and follow us to really um, understand what I wanted to say. You're going to have folks out here that not only are really super engaged and cheerleading about this decision, but will take every opportunity um, to make students of color, Black students,
Mhm.
Latino, Native American students, you name it, feel minimal because of it. And I mean, there are going to be times where people that are in spaces, both in school and outside of school, after you get into your workspace, that are going to challenge you and challenge the fact that you don't belong here because of some preconceived notion of merit.
Mhm.
And as somebody, and I'm speaking for myself, not to toot my own horn, but as somebody that's been an IT professional and excelled at the role for the better part of 25 years and counting against all comers, um, I don't have a problem tooting my horn and saying that I'm an HBCU product. I don't have a problem tooting my horn and saying because I'm an HBCU product, I excel better than just about everybody else. Thank you, Alabama. Thank you, University of the District of Columbia. And to a lesser extent, thank you to the United States military. I appreciate that. That being said, it's very imperative that we, as representatives of that community, continue to toot those horns, continue to let young folks know that not only is going to HBCUs an option, it's a very viable option. It's one of the best options out there to prepare you. And of
Mhm.
all the marketing and recruiting tools that are out there, that's the best one. Looking at the success of a kid, of a person that comes from a Southern University or Alabama State University, an Alcorn State, a Tuskegee, a Miles, a Morehouse, a Stillman, and seeing them just kick everybody's ass in the professional workplace. With all due respect to my colleagues that go to PWIs or attend PWIs, this is not necessarily a dig or a slight, but this is a reality in terms of perception, in terms of the lens that those people in certain workplaces view us in, whether we're PWI or HBCU related. And this goes out to my colleagues and brethren and counterparts that are us that occupy those spaces in PWIs. Because for lack of a better term, and I know, we got some infight, and sometimes when we do the PWI versus HBCU debate, we kind of get on each other's nerves sometimes. But at the end of the day, I have the utmost respect for the sister or brother that chose to matriculate at a Penn State or matriculate at a University of Maryland or matriculate at a UNC or a Duke and excel, because that's not an easy environment to excel in.
What's funny is I got into my school of choice. My school of choice was Notre Dame. I got accepted. I had a full scholarship and everything, and I still went to Southern, and I don't regret my decision.
Yeah, that sounds like, look, man. To me, look, I'm a native Washingtonian, born and raised. I grew up in the shadow of both Georgetown University during John Thompson's time at Georgetown, where the Hoyas, George Washington, University of Maryland, and right down the street from Howard University. I was very fortunate. I also had the benefit of having family from Southern Virginia, right around Virginia State, Virginia Union, and St. Paul's College, a tiny little HBCU that unfortunately is no longer there anymore in Lawrenceville, Virginia. That's where I got my roots from. But in the same vein, I knew what it was like to see kids from Howard University or UDC go into a space with those kids from George Washington or GW or American, or Marymount or George Mason or the University of Virginia or Virginia Tech, and not only compete, but beat those guys, but to excel. And that's what it's all about. It's, in order for us to bring the HBCU experience to a new generation of kids that may not have had the parental input or exposure that we might have had, being, having family members go, or having, being in close proximity to those schools. That's the best foot forward you can put. It's just, in my case, I'm an IT professional, 25 years. I'm what you would call an IT generalist, meaning that I've mastered a lot of things. I've mastered programming, systems administration, operations. And I can apply just about everything that I have to any job out there. Right now, I'm an enterprise SharePoint developer and engineer that manages a team. My previous gig, I was a cybersecurity threat analyst. I don't have a disclaimer. I don't have a disclaimer for the sneeze though, but but I say all that to say that my well-rounded background came from my HBCU experience. It came from those days in Dr. Roosevelt Steptoe's math class, differential equations, where we had one kid bust a curve in the class every time, and like everybody else was pissed at him because he kept on popping the curve of the tests of the class. It's those
Mm-hmm.
experiences that shaped me. You know, and I don't think I would have gotten those experiences um, at a UVA or Virginia Tech or even the University of Maryland, which I was, to me, that's my dream. That if there was a non HBCU that I would have went to, it would have been the University of Maryland because that's where I felt the most at home. But I wouldn't have got that same experience. I wouldn't have got that one-on-one care. I wouldn't have got that encouragement to excel. And that's what HBCUs are all about. That's what the idea of the HBCU experience is, in contrast to what affirmative action represented. And I think people on both sides of this argument. Well, no, I take that back. Not both sides, because there's one side of this argument that doesn't care what lens they view us through. There's one side of the argument
Right.
that thinks that we don't belong there in the first place. So I want people to really understand that the mentality that removed affirmative action didn't go anywhere. In fact, it's always been there. They just had to wait stuff out. And evidently, they waited long enough and got what they wanted.
They were waiting for people to stop caring and paying attention. They were
Yeah.
waiting for people to slip, and they slipped. They will wait. It's And the thing is, the people that are in the Supreme Court, you got to think, you got to know, they're not going to know until they die. That's the only way they lose their job. They have to die, or it's going to take some extreme circumstances to get rid of them. They are who they're going to be, and they were set there with a purpose, and they're getting things done. The things that were planned ahead, years ahead. That
Yeah.
was the point.
And real quick, before we close the show out, we're going to close the show out a little bit on a lighter note. We're going to take another little ad break, about 15, 30 seconds. Then we'll be right back to close the show and talk about our next podcast. Stay tuned.
We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us.
A Black future happens all the time. It's built on a foundation of those who have paved the way. A generation ago, all of this would have seemed unheard of. And what's new to the world now will be incomparable to what's coming up next. Trust your dream. The future is counting on it.
Now, thank you, and we're back. We're going to talk about some stuff that we like talking about now. It's games and technology. Now, your boy has finally, he's finally broke down. He's joined the PS5 club. I've caved in, and as you can see in the background, old Whitey in the back is back there on my table with the controllers, and I decided the first game I downloaded was FIFA 2023, and I had forgotten how frustrating it is to play online against folks that really know how to play. And I consider myself as somebody that's pretty skilled at FIFA. I mean, I'm a fan, but these new kids on something else, man. If you're on FIFA and you playing in seasons, man, you're taking your life if you don't know how to play. And even if you know how to play, some of these kids are extremely skilled, which begs me to that, which reminds me to kind of put this out there for the folks at HBCU esports out there. Hey, yo, you guys need to go ahead and create a masters HBCU master circuit, from for everything from Street Fighter to Tekken to Madden and FIFA, because I think that would be really really dope. You know, divvy everything up per conference and do your thing. Um, but yeah, my FIFA misery aside, what games have you been playing?
I'm still part of that PC master race. As soon as I can get all this other expenses out, I'm gonna go ahead and buckle down and get my PS5. But I kind of jumped back into Dragon Quest 11. I've been on some RPGs. I have yet to join the Diablo cult, and I will probably wait until it dies down or gets a couple updates.
Yeah, I'm good on Diablo.
My
Yeah.
roommate, let's put it this way, my roommate, the night she got the Ultimate Edition, so she got it the Thursday night instead of the Tuesday night. When I tell you, it took everything in me to tell her to go to bed so we can go to work the next morning, because she was up all night the first night, and then that entire like once we get off, I don't care what you do for the whole weekend, and that was her week. That's been her life ever since. I'm actually surprised she went out tonight.
Man, look, let me tell you. Like I said, between that and my PC playing on Call of Duty, um, I'm still really debating on what game I'm going to get next, or what I'm going to wait out for, because I know I'm trying waiting. I'm waiting in vain. I don't know if I'm waiting in vain, but we're all waiting. All of us that are college football fans, we're waiting for EA to kind of stop messing around with these students and go ahead and do what they need to do. Pay them, do whatever you got to do, so we can get the NCAA 2024 thing going and get this football out. But there may be an alternative out there that's going to be released this fall to EA, and it's called Maximum Overdrive Football. It's going to be a free download on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, pretty much all consoles. And from what I've seen of it, the gameplay looks pretty nice. It's pretty dope,
It does.
and the customization, the level of customization in the game will allow people that are college football fans to really indulge, meaning they can do their own uniform designs all the way down to the stadiums, all the way down to um, all the way down to the names if need be. And I think that's going to be a really really dope thing to see. There are a couple other things that I'm waiting on too. I also have an Xbox back there, an Xbox S, as you can see on the cardboard box. It's kind of been pushed to the side, but it's kind of coming in third to the PC and the PlayStation 5. But I'm going to try out Starfield. Starfield has um, anybody that's been on YouTube has got a chance to see the gameplay preview for Starfield. It looks amazing. Um, it looks really, really good. It's really immersive. It's open world, and there are elements of both third person, and FPS play in it. And for somebody that's a real fan of space sims, I ain't spending that type of scratch on Star Citizen, so this is the next best thing. And
Yeah.
anybody that's familiar with Star Citizen, at this point, I think Star Citizen is kind of like a Ponzi scheme at this point, because they keep on putting out modules, and like they're going to release a whole game, and it's like, yo, when are you guys going to release a whole game? It's been like a decade now since you guys have started the project. So yeah, it's really going to be a good. This summer and fall is really going to be good for gamers. And we're not just talking about the random run of the mill release that come about, as kind of money grabs for gamers. Um, Ubisoft is putting out a Call of Duty competitor in X Defiant. Um,
Yeah, I
I
saw
got a chance
that.
to I got a chance to play the beta for it, and it is smooth. when the regular gameplay comes out this fall, it's going to be pretty nice. I am definitely going to invest in playing it and comparing it against the two. Um, Outside of that, man, it's going to be really interesting to see how things go on that front. You know, consumer tech. Be quite honest, I haven't been really enthused about consumer tech. I've lost my appetite for watching, watching Apple um have their demos and stuff, and I have to really force
Oh,
myself to watch it.
oh, you
And
mean you
it's
don't want to see the same thing released for the same year every year since the last 4 years? Oh no!
pretty much. It's gotten a little
Oh
bit.
no! You don't want to see the
Yeah,
bigger screen. You don't want to see the slightly bigger screen or the slightly touchier pen or the
yeah,
slightly different operating system.
yeah. I'm good, fam. I'm good on that. And I mean, I think I think that's kind of indicative of where we're kind of headed to, in general, when it comes to consumer electronics. It's about the plateau. Particularly for folks that are a little bit more tech savvy or more nuanced than the folks that are either just diehard team Apple all day every day. It doesn't matter what comes out, I got it anyway. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, that doesn't excite me anymore. Um, I saw something that really raised an eyebrow though, and uh, that was the new Google Pixel Flip, the new Google Pixel Fold. That was actually
Ooh.
Yeah, that looked pretty intriguing. So um, yeah, I'm hold out hope that Google doesn't lose interest in this project like they do everything else. But from what it looks like it's a pretty good look. It looks like it might be a good addition to that ecosystem of devices and services. So, but
Basically, we're going
that
back to
remains.
flip phones. So, well, look at that! Look at that! We're going back to flip phones. Me having a flip phone. So, yeah.
Why you just showing off at this point? You showing off, man.
Don't thank me. Don't thank me. Thank Android.
Yeah,
So, I
I'm still
mean,
part of
Apple will
that.
have it in 2 more years. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm
They
still
got
part
you.
of that I'm still part of that Max Master Pixel race right here to Pixel 7. So, yeah,
At,
and I think
at
I'm gonna
least
be on
y'all
the
have a fold.
yeah, but I think I'm gonna be on the Pixel for a good minute. I'm not leaving this phone. Uh it's been pretty dope, and I like what I've gotten from it. So unless I see something earth shattering, something that can transform into like a vehicle or some shit, then nah, I think I'm good.
Nah,
But
I'm all flip phones. I'm gonna get. I think the 5 is coming out this year, and it's time for my upgrade. So I think I'm gonna get the 5. So
I'm not ready for that.
it. It's the feeling of hanging up on somebody that really make you mad. And you just and oh, it's
That's
that old school.
hilarious.
You made me mad. Slam. Oh, we haven't
Click.
had that feeling since rotary phones. You can give them
You
a
just
real
don't have.
audible click.
Yeah, you're missing the audible click. You ain't got to say click. You
I'm
just
not about.
click.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not angry enough to do this. This is how screens get broken. I can just and we done.
Oh man, this has been a good episode. Before we roll out, I gotta give some quick shout outs here. First, again to our content contributors for the podcast, Leslie, Dave, Dominic, Roberto, and myself. Thank you guys. As always, the show is always on point, no matter who's in the rotation, and we've got y'all to thank for it. So thank you guys. And if you're following us, I think I posted it earlier. You see these guys on Twitter or Instagram or any of your social media feeds, follow them, please.
Oh yeah, you gotta
Um,
my updated Twitter. Okay, viewer discretion is advised on my Twitter. That's all I'm
oh
saying.
boy, what?
It is my Twitter. It does not represent the viewpoints of the Black Techies. But just a heads up, you get my honest opinion. 100%.
Okay. Yeah, put that disclaimer in the description for the Twitter feed.
Like follow at your own risk, but I can't guarantee you'll love it, but I can guarantee you'll be entertained. It's my
Yeah,
gamer Twitter. It's me. Woo, it's
yeah,
me.
yeah. And I'll be remiss, man. I know I got a banner up for some other references. Um, Folks that have followed me on social media know that I have one foot in the tech space, and I also have one foot as a contributor and writer in the HBCU sports and culture space. And the folks that I have here, HBCU Digital Network, obviously, thank you, Mr. Powell and company for giving us a platform, as well as some other HBCU sports and culture entities out there. More specifically, Mr. Hadley over at FAMU Fangs Up for the Fangs Up podcast. Big shout out to those guys. Big shout out to HBCU Esports, man. Those guys are doing some really big stuff. Really big shout out to MEAC Esports, SWAC Esports. Um, Without a doubt, big shout out to Joshua over and the gang over at HBCU Nightly. We are normally on Twitter streams every week. We're taking a little bit of a hiatus. I think we're going to start up probably in August as to coincide with the start of the football season. We're on the Twitter Spaces live and on YouTube every Wednesday and Thursday night. So catch us. We talk about everything from football, basketball, to stuff like we were talking about today. It's a really good listen, and rooms are always packed. So um, be sure to catch HBC Nightly and the crew there. Um, Big shout out to my girl Yard Talk. If you're talking about marketing and branding amongst HBCUs, this is the expert. She is the guru, and she is a Grambling grad. So big shout out to them. Big shout out to Offscript, my boy Scotty. Sometimes, man, he likes to ruffle his feathers. He's a habitual line stepper when it comes to HBCUs and sports and things like that. But in the same vein, my boy, he always has receipts. And when he's not on point or when he's wrong, he fesses up. So it's a refreshing voice to have in the space. Big shout out to Scotty. Um, HBCU game day. I mean, what can you say? They the GOAT. My boy Steven, Gaither, Wally Pitt, and those guys, man. They're one of the reasons why I got to the space in the first place. And it's good to be able to rub shoulders with those guys on occasion. My boy over at HBCU Legends, fellow Hornet, fellow Marching Hornet, fellow Alabama State product. Follow my boy there, man. He's a writer in Montgomery, as well as on the HBCU Legends Sports Illustrated site, and he covers all HBCU athletics. Really good stuff, man. When you see these guys, follow them. Particularly if you really want to be connected in the HBCU sports and culture space. HBCU esports in particular, they got some really big stuff that's coming up, and I'm really excited in seeing what they got coming in terms of tournaments, in terms of circuits and leagues and stuff. So if you are, if you're at a HBCU, if you're an alum, if you're a fan, if you're um, anywhere in between and you're a gamer, hit these guys up, because more often than not, they may have a game or platform or circuit for whatever skill level and wherever status you are. So I had to put that out there. For everybody else, for our audience, thank you very, very much for checking us out. Um, it's good to be back. It's good to be back, and it's good for us to be able to really talk about the issues that we need to talk about today. Um, it was going to be hard to not talk about it, but I'm glad we got a chance to do so. So until the next episode, for myself, for Leslie, for Dave, Dom, Roberto. Check us out. Hail Wakanda. Hail Wakanda. Peace.